A silent mountain holds cuts that defy history. This ancient quarry presents a technological riddle carved directly into the earth. By the end of this journey, you will gain a new framework for understanding the hidden capabilities of our ancestors. How did workers achieve machine-like precision in stone thousands of years ago? And why does their method remain a secret? The answers force us to rewrite chapters of human innovation we assumed were complete. What forgotten kind of intelligence does our past truly contain? This landscape does not shout for attention. It rests in a quiet corner of the world, far from the celebrated river valleys and coastlines where we expect ancient genius to flourish. Our story unfolds on a high, windswept plateau, a place of immense sky and enduring silence. The air is thin here, scented with dry earth and wild herbs. The only constant company is the wind, sculpting the low brush and whispering across stone that has witnessed millennia. This profound isolation is not an accident. It is the opening argument of the mystery. Why would a society invest immense effort, the kind of effort that produces architectural marvels, in such a remote and challenging place? The answer begins with the ground beneath their feet. This plateau is not just rock, it is a specific and formidable type of stone, often a granite or basalt of exceptional density and hardness. To the modern eye, it is beautiful, flecked with crystal, and possessing a deep, resonant color. But to an ancient worker with a copper chisel, this material represents a near impossible barrier. It laughs at soft metals and dulls tools in minutes. This makes the evidence waiting there, the evidence of clean, deep, and precise cuts, not just impressive but logically perplexing. The geography itself is the first witness, testifying that what happened here was not routine quarrying. It was a deliberate choice, a confrontation with one of nature's most durable canvases. And on that canvas, they left a signature of cuts so straight and surfaces so smooth. They seem to speak a language of technology we are still struggling to translate. A technique so advanced for its time that its very mechanics have vanished from history, leaving behind only these pristine, silent surfaces as its only testament. The smooth planes are only the beginning of the geometric puzzle. Where two of these impossibly flat surfaces meet, they form a corner, but this is no ordinary junction of stone. The angle created is a perfect 90 degrees, a precise right angle carved directly into the heart of the granite. This consistency is staggering. Across multiple blocks, internal and external corners meet with the same unerring accuracy, a uniformity that whispers of a master plan. In an era we often picture as one of rough estimation and hand-eye coordination, this level of geometric control should not exist. It forces a simple yet profound question. How do you create a perfect right angle on a surface larger than a dining table, using tools that, by our current understanding, were not designed for such finesse? Think of a modern woodworker building a bookshelf. To ensure it is square, they rely on a metal carpenter's square, a tool whose own perfection is factory guaranteed. They might use a level to check for plumb or a precise measuring tape. Each of these tools is a product of industrial manufacturing, allowing for tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter. The ancient workers here possessed none of these conveniences, yet their results rival them. This suggests their knowledge was not merely practical, it was deeply theoretical. They understood the principles of perpendicularity and plane geometry not as abstract concepts, but as physical laws they could impose upon the most stubborn material on Earth. Historians who study traditional stonemasonry note that achieving such a corner freehand, especially on granite, borders on the impossible. The margin for error is vanishingly small. A single errant strike with a hammer would chip the edge, ruining the clean line. The consistent perfection we see points decisively toward the use of guides, a form of ancient jig or template that held their tools in the exact orientation needed, stroke after stroke. This transforms the image of the worker from a laborer swinging a hammer into something closer to a technician operating a calibrated system. The perfect corner, therefore, is more than a shape. It is a fossilized thought process. It is the physical echo of a repeatable method, a controlled procedure that has left no trace of itself except for the flawless evidence it produced in stone. We are left to wonder what form these guides took. Were they wooden frames? Were they other, precisely cut stones used as references? Whatever the system, its existence implies a culture that valued and achieved standardization on a monumental scale, turning individual blocks into interchangeable components of a grander, unseen design. But the geometry of the surface is only half the story. To understand the true depth of this mystery, you must look down into the earth itself. Carved directly into the living bedrock of the plateau are a series of deep, narrow trenches. These are not the broad, chaotic pits of a typical quarry. They are precise, linear grooves, often no wider than the span of your hand, yet they plunge several feet straight down into solid granite. Standing at the edge of one, you are struck by their intentionality. They are not accidental fractures or erosion channels. They are deliberate, engineered cuts. Their very existence poses a practical riddle that cuts to the heart of the technological enigma. What possible purpose could such a slender, profound incision serve? The debate among researchers is lively. One school of thought suggests these were splitting trenches. The idea is that workers would cut these deep, narrow channels in a precise grid on the bedrock surface. Then, by driving wooden wedges into the grooves and soaking them with water to make them expand, they could theoretically split the stone along these predetermined lines, creating perfectly sized blocks with minimal effort. It is an elegant theory, but it faces a formidable obstacle. The granite here is notoriously non-porous and resistant to fracture. Creating the initial trench, that deep and narrow incision, would itself require a tool or technique of immense focused power. It is the classic chicken and egg problem of ancient technology. Another idea is that these trenches were themselves the final product, perhaps part of a foundation system for some grand structure, or even a component of a complex water management scheme for the site. Yet others wonder if the act of cutting itself held a deeper, ceremonial significance, a way of interacting with the sacred stone of the mountain. When we look for parallels, we find faint echoes but no perfect matches. There are similar trenches at sites like the Olmec centers of ancient Mexico or in some Egyptian quarries, but none exhibit the same marriage of staggering depth and knife-edge precision seen here. These grooves are less like quarry marks and more like surgical incisions. They speak of a methodology obsessed with control and minimal waste. In a modern machine shop, this is a core principle. You use a fine blade to cut exactly what you need, leaving the surrounding material untouched and ready for another purpose. This ancient trench embodies that same sophisticated mindset. It represents a deliberate, efficient application of force, a far cry from the brute force pounding we often attribute to the past. The trench, therefore, is a silent argument. It argues for a process that was not about overwhelming the stone, but about outthinking it. It suggests workers who understood the material so intimately, they knew exactly where and how to apply pressure to achieve a clean, deep separation with almost no collateral damage. The tool that made this possible remains a ghost, but its shadow, long and narrow and impossibly deep, is permanently etched into the floor of the plateau. The stone itself is the silent, unyielding witness to this mystery. To grasp the scale of what was achieved, we must meet the material on its own terms. This plateau is not composed of a soft, forgiving sandstone or a crumbly limestone. The bedrock here is a dense, crystalline granite, often shot through with veins of quartz, one of the hardest minerals on our planet. Think of the difference between carving a bar of soap and carving a slab of concrete filled with crushed glass. That is the practical gap we are confronting. Egyptologist Chris Dunn has often highlighted this stark physical reality. The copper tools available to ancient cultures are significantly softer than the granite they supposedly cut. A copper chisel struck against this quartz-rich stone would not bite into it. Instead, the metal's edge would deform, flatten, and become useless within a matter of strokes. It would be like trying to slice a loaf of crusty bread with a spoon. The material itself resists the very action we assume was used to shape it. This is not a minor detail. It transforms the narrative from a story of impressive craftsmanship into a logistical paradox. The conventional model of patient pounding and abrasion hits a literal wall when faced with this geology. The granite's uniform, interlocking crystal structure gives it no natural weakness to exploit. It dulls primitive tools faster than they could possibly be resharpened, making any large-scale project with such methods an exercise in futility. This leads to an inescapable and profound implication. The builders did not choose this stone despite its hardness. They chose it because of its hardness. They selected the most durable, eternal canvas they could find, fully confident in their ability to master it. This single fact forces a fundamental shift in our perspective. We are not looking at a culture struggling against the limits of their technology. We are looking at a culture whose technology, at least in this specific application, rendered those limits meaningless. Their confidence is petrified in every smooth surface and perfect corner. The stone, intended to defy time, now defies our historical explanations, posing a quiet, granite-hard question about what we have missed in the story of human innovation. The silence of the plateau is echoed by a second, equally profound silence in the archaeological record. Where are the tools? If the stone itself is a testament to a forgotten technology, then the ground should be littered with its broken, discarded implements. Yet it is not. No storerooms have been found containing super-hard bronze saws with diamond teeth. No workshops have yielded evidence of massive, complex machinery. This absence is not a gap in the story. It is a critical chapter written in empty space. At comparable sites from the same broad era, what archaeologists typically uncover are simple copper chisels, their edges blunted and bent, and rounded stones of dolerite, a hard volcanic rock used for pounding. These are the universal tools of the ancient stoneworker's kit, and when held against the mirror-smooth granite faces and those deep, surgical trenches, they feel like children's toys. They are woefully, demonstrably inadequate for the task before us. This mismatch between cause and effect is the core of the technological mystery. It forces us into a realm of fascinating speculation. One compelling theory suggests the tools were perishable. Imagine a long, flexible cord like a giant bowstring, embedded with a slurry of water and an abrasive harder than quartz, perhaps crushed corundum or even diamonds. Powered by teams of workers or even a simple water wheel, such a device could act as a continuous, flexible saw, capable of slicing through granite over time. The cord would wear away, the abrasive slurry would wash into the soil, and no durable tool would remain to be found centuries later. Another possibility is that the true cutting implements were so rare, so valuable, or so central to the builder's identity that they were never discarded. They would have been curated, maintained, and passed down through generations, or perhaps ritually retired when their work was done, removed from the site entirely. But the most intriguing path of inquiry leads away from physical tools altogether. The utter lack of them pushes us to consider non-material techniques. Could the builders have mastered a method of applying focused heat, perhaps with mirrors or lenses, to thermally shock the granite, making it brittle and easier to work? Is there any merit to the old legends of cultures using plant-based chemical agents to soften stone, a lost botanical knowledge? Or more abstractly, could they have harnessed resonant sound, using specific frequencies to vibrate the stone along its natural crystalline planes, guiding a fracture with sonic precision? These ideas sound like the realm of fantasy, and they are treated with great skepticism by mainstream archaeology, and for good reason. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Yet the stone itself is extraordinary evidence. The complete absence of conventional tools for such a conventional, massive project forces the question wide open. It invites us to expand our understanding of what ancient science might have encompassed. We are left contemplating not just a lost tool, but potentially a lost branch of practical knowledge, a way of interacting with the physical world that operated on principles we have yet to rediscover. The empty ground, therefore, speaks volumes. It tells us that the answer to the quarry's riddle may not be buried in the earth, but dissolved in time, waiting to be conceived anew in our imagination. Cutting the stone was only the first impossible task. The next was moving it. Scattered across the quarry floor are blocks of finished granite, each one a monolith weighing many tons, the equivalent of several large elephants. They rest in positions that are not random. Some sit at the heads of smooth, gently sloping ramps carved directly from the bedrock. Others are aligned along wide, cleared pathways that lead toward the plateau's edge. In one telling area, a shelf of stone juts out over a natural drop, its surface worn smooth and level, looking for all the world like a prepared loading dock, a place where a block could be carefully pivoted and lowered. This is not a collection of abandoned efforts. It is a frozen moment in a meticulously planned logistical operation. The layout itself is a blueprint, revealing a society that thought not in terms of single stones, but in terms of systems. The ramps are engineered with a specific, manageable grade to reduce the force needed. The pathways are cleared of obstructions, suggesting repeated use. Every feature points toward a single, staggering conclusion. The builders fully intended to remove these colossal blocks from this remote mountain, and they had a clear, repeatable method for doing so. The most eloquent clue is a block that was never freed. It remains partially attached to the living bedrock, but its sides have been cut clean and smooth on all four faces. It is a perfect rectangle, already shaped for its final purpose, yet it rests in a state of suspended animation. Its position is deliberate. It sits at the top of one of those prepared ramps, oriented perfectly for movement. Studying it, you can almost see the next steps in the process. Workers would have slid wooden rollers or perhaps a sturdy sledge beneath it. Ropes, likely made from woven plant fibers of immense strength, would have been secured. Then, using the ramp's incline and principles of leverage we still use today, teams could have begun the slow, controlled descent, guiding the multi-ton mass down the mountain. This single, unfinished block is a snapshot of advanced project management. It reveals an intimate understanding of physics, of center of gravity, of friction, of mechanical advantage. They knew exactly how to cut and position the stone so that when the time came to move it, the greatest challenges of weight and balance had already been solved at the quarry face. This transforms our image of the site entirely. We are not looking at a simple quarry where people hacked out stone. We are witnessing the evidence of a prehistoric industrial complex. The coordination required is immense. It implies distinct, specialized roles. There were the master cutters applying their mysterious technology to shape the granite. But there were also engineers who designed the ramps and roadways. There were foremen who organized the labor crews, coordinating the cutting with the moving. There were loggers who sourced the timber for rollers and levers. There were rope makers, path clearers, and supply coordinators. This level of organization is a hallmark of a sophisticated, hierarchical society, one capable of planning projects that spanned years or even generations. We rarely attribute this kind of complex systems thinking to pre-industrial cultures. often viewing their great works as monuments of sheer, brute force manpower. But the quarry tells a different story. It speaks of intelligence applied to logistics, of a society that solved the problem of the unmovable not just with muscle, but with meticulous, forward-thinking design. The silent pathways and waiting ramps ask us a quiet, profound question. If they could plan the movement of mountains with such precision, what unimaginable structure were these perfect stones destined to build? The perfect pathways lead our eyes upward from the engineered ramps to the vast sky above the plateau. Here, the mystery deepens in a new dimension. Some of the most prominent quarry faces, those long, smooth walls where the stone was extracted, are not oriented randomly to the landscape. Instead, they align with specific points on the horizon where the sun or moon rises on key days of the year, like the solstices. This alignment is subtle but measurable. It presents a haunting question. Was this a deliberate choice, connecting the act of cutting stone to the cycles of the cosmos? Or is it simply a fortunate accident of geography, providing the best possible light for the delicate work at dawn on a winter's day? This is the point where practical archaeology meets the study of ancient skies, a field known as archaeoastronomy, and the experts here are often divided. One camp sees a profound ritual significance. In many ancient cultures, stone was not just a building material, it was the bones of the earth, a sacred substance. Extracting it, especially with such advanced methods, would have been an act of immense power and responsibility. Aligning that act with a solstice sunrise could have been a way to harness celestial energy, to consecrate the stone at the moment of its birth from the mountain, infusing it with the power of the sun at its turning point. The quarry, in this view, becomes a temple of extraction, a place where technology served a spiritual purpose. The opposing view is grounded in sheer practicality. Granite is unforgiving. Seeing a fine cut line clearly is everything. Having the low angle of the solstice sun raked directly across a freshly cut surface would illuminate every minute imperfection, every deviation from the perfect plane. It would be the ultimate quality control, a natural spotlight provided by the universe itself. This alignment would give the master cutters the best possible working conditions for their most precise tasks. But what if this is a false choice? What if the most compelling answer is that both explanations are true, and were true for the builders? This duality between advanced engineering and spiritual cosmology is a thread that runs through many of the world's most enigmatic ancient sites. It challenges our modern tendency to compartmentalize the world into science and religion, into the practical and the sacred. For these builders, that separation may not have existed. Their advanced method was not just a technical process, it was a ritual act. Their precise geometry was an expression of cosmic order. The perfect right angle was not just structurally sound, it was spiritually harmonious. The solstice alignment did not have to be either for better light or for celestial blessing. It could have been, and likely was, for both simultaneously. Their worldview was likely seamless. Understanding the sun's path was both a practical calendar for their work and a sacred map of the divine. Mastering the stone was both a feat of engineering and an act of communion with the living earth. This integrated intelligence is perhaps the most difficult concept for us to grasp today. We see a smooth cut and we immediately search for the advanced tool. We see a solstice alignment and we debate ritual versus utility. The builders may have simply seen one unified action, a single expression of a knowledge system that encompassed the material and the celestial into one coherent whole. The quarry, therefore, is not just a monument to lost technology. It is a monument to a lost way of thinking, where every stroke of the unseen tool resonated on both a physical and a spiritual frequency. The stone holds another kind of memory, written not by tools but by weather. Look closely at the quarry walls, at the platforms and ramps carved from the living bedrock. Their surfaces are not uniformly smooth. In many places, you can see distinct, rounded channels and deep, scalloped hollows etched into the granite. These are classic, undeniable signatures of water erosion. They are the kind of patterns that form not from a few passing storms, but from centuries, perhaps millennia, of exposure to heavy, consistent rainfall or even flowing streams. This observation opens a door to a profound and deeply controversial question about time itself. The climate of this high plateau today is arid, a landscape of wind and dust. The conditions needed to create these specific erosion patterns simply do not exist here now. They point to a distant past when this region was radically different, a much wetter and potentially warmer epoch. Geologists like Dr. Robert Schoch have famously applied this same logic to other ancient sites, using the language of water-worn stone to argue for timelines that stretch far beyond conventional archaeological dates. When you apply that lens here, the implications are staggering. It suggests the quarry's precise cuts were not made in the dry world we see today, but in a forgotten age of rains. If true, this does more than just add years to a calendar. It completely resets the technological timeline we have constructed. The mystery is no longer just about how they achieved such precision, but when they could have possibly done it. We are confronted with a temporal dislocation to match the technological one. Could the master cutters have worked their craft not 3,000 years ago, but 6,000 or even 10? Such a proposition challenges the very foundations of how we understand human progress, suggesting that peaks of sophisticated engineering may have risen and fallen in cycles lost to deep time. The watermarks, therefore, are more than geological footnotes. They are a potential counter-narrative, a slow, patient argument written in the stone by countless droplets, whispering that our history may be far older and far more mysterious than our textbooks have ever dared to suggest. The watermarks whisper of deep time, but the cuts themselves demand a practical explanation. Among the many theories, one stands out for its elegant simplicity and its grounding in the physics we still use today. It is the idea of a lost mastery of abrasives. Think of the difference between trying to cut a thick piece of wood with a dull knife versus slicing through it with a wire embedded with industrial diamonds. The principle is the same. This theory suggests the ancient workers did not try to fracture the granite with blunt force. Instead, they outsmarted it, using a substance harder than the stone itself to slowly, meticulously wear it away. The envisioned process is both ingenious and humble. It begins with a slurry, a thick mixture of water and a carefully selected abrasive grit. This grit would need to be harder than the quartz crystals in the granite. Natural corundum, the mineral that forms rubies and sapphires, would be perfect. Crushed diamonds, while rare, are another possibility. This abrasive paste would then be applied to the cutting interface. One compelling model uses a taut, vibrating cord, perhaps made of animal sinew or woven plant fibers, acting like a primitive bow saw. As workers drew the cord back and forth, the slurry would become embedded in the fibers, turning the entire length into a continuous, flexible blade of incredible hardness. Another idea involves hollow reeds or tubes. By pumping the abrasive slurry through these tubes under pressure and directing the stream against a marked line on the stone, they could effectively sandblast a precise groove, deepening it over time. The beauty of this method is its forensic silence. Once the cutting was done, the water would evaporate. The abrasive grit, now pulverized into fine dust, would wash away with the rain or be swept away by the wind. The cord or reed would eventually decay. No durable tool would remain for archaeologists to find centuries later, only the impossible cut it left behind. This theory powerfully connects ancient ingenuity to the immutable laws of physics. It suggests a deep observational intelligence, a culture that studied the natural world and understood that hardness is relative. They knew that by harnessing a harder substance, even in tiny particles, they could conquer the most formidable stone. Modern researchers have put this idea to the test. Using copper tools, sand, and water, Experiments have demonstrated that, given enough time and patience, granite can indeed be cut and shaped. These practical trials lend the theory significant credibility, showing that the method is not just plausible but demonstrably effective. Yet a formidable question lingers, one of scale and speed. The quarry is not a workshop for small artifacts. It is a landscape of monumental extraction with blocks weighing many tons. To produce such volume using only abrasive cords or sandblasting reeds would require an almost unimaginable investment of time and coordinated labor. It paints a picture of generations of workers patiently sawing and grinding, a society that committed its very identity to this slow, relentless process. While this theory provides a mechanically sound answer, it leaves us wondering if there was something more, a lost efficiency or a forgotten technique that turned this plausible method into the rapid, precise operation the quarry's scale seems to demand. But what if the tool was not a thing you could hold but a force you could feel? This leads us to a second, far more speculative theory, one that moves from the physics of abrasion to the physics of vibration. Some researchers propose that the builders may have harnessed a powerful, intangible agent, sound. The idea is that by generating specific, carefully controlled frequencies, perhaps through massive drums, deep chanting, or even large, tuned stone plates, they could induce a state of resonance within the granite itself. At the correct frequency, the stone would begin to vibrate in harmony with the sound, its internal crystalline structure agitated at a molecular level. In this resonant state, the bonds between mineral grains could theoretically weaken, making the material more pliable, almost as if it were temporarily softened, allowing for precise shaping with far less physical force. To our modern, material-centric minds, this sounds like the stuff of legend or fringe science. Yet, we cannot dismiss it out of hand. There are persistent ethnographic accounts from various parts of the world describing rituals where sound is used in the context of moving or working with large stones. These are often framed as stories or ceremonial practices, but they point to a long-held, cross-cultural intuition that vibration and matter are deeply connected. Furthermore, the quarry site itself might hold a clue. Its high walls and open basins could act as a natural amphitheater, potentially amplifying and focusing certain frequencies, turning the entire landscape into a kind of resonant chamber. This theory fundamentally challenges our definition of ancient technology. It asks us to consider that advanced knowledge might not have been solely about forging harder metals or creating complex mechanics. It could have been about mastering energy itself, understanding the hidden vibrations that course through all solid things, and learning to conduct them like a symphony. If there is any truth to this idea, then the workers were not just masons or engineers. They were akin to physicists or perhaps even conductors, wielding a form of acoustic technology that leaves no physical trace except for the stone it supposedly shaped. This pushes the mystery into a realm that is difficult to verify with traditional archaeology, yet impossible to completely ignore, for it expands the very idea of a tool from something made of matter to something made of pure, directed knowledge. Fire and water offer a third, deeply compelling path to solving the quarry's riddle. This theory envisions the ancient workers not as patient sanders or sonic conductors, but as masters of elemental force, wielding the raw power of heat and cold like a surgical instrument. The principle is rooted in a simple, observable truth of physics. Granite is a crystalline material, and crystals expand when heated and contract when cooled. Apply that cycle rapidly and with extreme intensity along a precise line, and you create a powerful stress point within the stone itself. The method is known as thermal spalling. Imagine building a long, controlled fire directly on the granite surface, following a carefully marked cut line. The intense heat causes the crystals in that narrow band to expand violently. Then, at the peak of that expansion, workers would douse the glowing rock with cold water. The sudden, drastic cooling forces the expanded crystals to contract instantly, creating an internal shockwave. This thermal shock can be so severe that the rock fractures cleanly along the heated zone, splitting as if guided by an invisible blade. It is a technique of controlled violence, a way to make the stone break itself. And within the quarry, there are intriguing clues that point in this very direction. Researchers have noted the presence of darkened, soot-stained areas on some quarry faces, and the remnants of what appear to be small, strategic fire pits positioned along linear patterns. This is not evidence of random campfires. It suggests localized, repeated application of heat for a specific purpose. The theory transforms our image of the technology yet again. Here, the tools are a pile of kindling, a container of water, and a profound understanding of material science. The workers become applied chemists and physicists, manipulating the fundamental properties of matter to do their bidding. They were not cutting the stone in the traditional sense. They were persuading it to open along a preordained fault line of their own creation, using the elemental dialogue between fire and ice. This method has historical echoes in later periods, from medieval siege warfare to some traditional stoneworking practices, which lends it a thread of credibility. It is a brutally elegant solution that requires no mythical materials or lost machines, just keen observation, repeatable experimentation, and the courage to harness tremendous natural forces. If this was their method, then every smooth wall in the quarry is a testament to a terrifying and beautiful precision, the precision of a controlled explosion frozen in stone. It suggests a culture that saw in the crackle of flame and the hiss of steam not just utility, but a kind of elemental partnership, a way to converse with the mountain in a language of temperature and fracture. Fire and water offer a powerful, physical explanation, but the fourth theory invites us into the realm of botanical mystery. What if the secret to the quarry's impossible cuts grew in the ground, not in a forge? Across the world, from the Andes to the Mediterranean, there persist folk tales and chronicles that speak of a lost knowledge, a liquid or a paste derived from plants that could, for a time, make hard stone soft and pliable like clay. To modern science, this sounds like pure fantasy, the stuff of alchemical dreams. Yet, this idea cannot be dismissed simply because it feels mythical. Our ancestors were masterful experimental botanists, living in intimate dialogue with their environment for millennia. They knew which leaves healed fever, which roots could stun fish, and which barks contained potent medicines. Is it so unimaginable that in this vast, living library of botanical knowledge, they might have discovered a plant whose sap or fermented extract contained organic acids strong enough to interact with the silicate bonds in granite? Certain acids found in nature, like those from some lichens or aggressive vines, are known to slowly etch and weather stone surfaces over centuries. The hypothesis suggests the builders may have identified a specific, potent source and learned to concentrate its effect, creating a poultice or a painted-on solution. They would apply this agent along a marked line on the granite. Over hours or days, the chemical reaction would weaken the crystalline matrix at the surface, not liquefying the stone but making it friable, almost like a hard cheese left out in the sun. In this temporarily altered state, the stone could be worked, carved, and shaped with simple tools of wood or bone with relative ease. Once the chemical agent was washed away or neutralized, the stone would reharden, leaving behind a smooth, precise cut that bore none of the marks of physical pounding or sawing. This theory is perhaps the most difficult to prove, as any such organic compound would have completely dissipated into the environment over the centuries, leaving no chemical trace for archaeologists to detect today. Its evidence is purely negative: the absence of tool marks and the presence of a cultural memory that spans continents. Yet its value lies not in its provability, but in the profound shift in perspective it demands. It asks us to reconsider the very nature of ancient innovation. We are a culture obsessed with hardware, with a tangible tool. But what if their greatest invention was not a thing, but a recipe? What if their breakthrough was biochemical, a form of applied natural wisdom that treated the mountain not as an adversary to be conquered with force, but as a material to be conversed with, persuaded through a kind of green alchemy? This idea underscores a haunting possibility. In our historical narrative, we chart a clear line of progress from stone to bronze to iron, a story dominated by metallurgy and mechanics. But what if other paths of technological development, ones based on deep botanical and ecological knowledge, flourished and then were lost? The plant-based solvent hypothesis, whether literally true or not, serves as a vital reminder. It tells us that the intelligence of the past may have operated in languages we have forgotten how to speak, using the quiet chemistry of the living world to achieve what we assume required only the loud clang of metal. The silent stone refuses to name its makers. There are no grand statues left behind, no carved declarations of a king's glory, no pottery shards stamped with a royal seal. This profound anonymity is not an oversight, it is a central part of the enigma. Who exactly possessed the knowledge to execute such work? The quarry offers no cultural fingerprints, leaving a vacuum that history abhors, and into that vacuum flow many theories. One enduring idea suggests the hands at work here belong to a lost civilization, a precursor culture whose technological peak occurred in a forgotten chapter of human history. According to this view, their achievements were so advanced that when later known civilizations encountered the ruins, they could not comprehend the origins and simply absorbed the sites into their own mythologies, attributing them to gods or giants. It is a compelling narrative offering a clean break from our flawed historical timeline. Yet there is another, perhaps more grounded possibility. What if the builders were not a separate people, but a highly specialized guild within a civilization we already know? Think of them as the ancient world's equivalent of a cutting-edge aerospace engineering firm. Fragmentary texts from various cultures sometimes hint at such elite groups' titles like overseers of the stoneworks or masters of the secret things, individuals who guarded proprietary knowledge passed down through initiated lineages. This was not common labor but a protected professional craft. The sheer scale of the operation supports this. To run this quarry required more than just stone cutters. It needed geologists who could identify the perfect seams of stone. It required chemists or botanists who understood abrasives or compounds. It demanded engineers to design the ramps, foremen to coordinate teams, and a vast support network of toolmakers, rope makers, cooks, and water bearers. This level of complex, stratified organization is the hallmark of a sophisticated, knowledge-based society, one capable of sustaining a long-term, resource-intensive project that served a grand communal vision. This brings us to a pivotal, reflective question for our modern mindset. When confronted with such a gap in our understanding, does the easy leap to attributing such work to extraterrestrial visitors or a mythical place like Atlantis actually do a disservice to the profound and untapped ingenuity of ancient human cultures? That leap, while imaginative, can unintentionally rob our own ancestors of their potential genius. It assumes that because we cannot immediately reconstruct their methods, they must have been beyond human capability. But what if the truth is simply that we have yet to fully understand the breadth and depth of human innovation in deep time? Perhaps the real mystery is not about who from the stars might have helped, but about which human society, through generations of observation, experimentation, and accumulated wisdom, learned to speak the language of stone with such fluency. The empty space where a signature should be challenges us to expand our view of human potential, to consider that peaks of technology may have risen and fallen in cycles long before our own, leaving behind only their most durable echoes in silent, waiting stone. The scale of ambition at Baalbek is almost beyond comprehension. In its quarries rests the stone of the pregnant woman, a single block of limestone estimated to weigh well over 1,000 tons. To visualize that, imagine a solid cube of stone the size of a small apartment building. The logistical challenge of moving such a mass is so immense it dominates the conversation, and rightly so. The methods proposed for its transport, a symphony of levers, rollers, and thousands of workers, speak to a society capable of staggering feats of organized labor. Yet, when we look closely at the stone itself, at the tool marks left behind, we see something fascinating. The surfaces are worked, often with deep, parallel grooves from large saws or by the repeated driving of metal wedges. The precision is there, but it is a precision of grand scale and tremendous power. It is the difference between forging a steel beam and crafting a watch. Our quarry, by stark contrast, presents a mystery of a different character. The blocks here are smaller, but the finish is where the true anomaly lies. Where Baalbek shows the muscular marks of its creation, our site displays an almost sterile smoothness. That absence of tool marks is the critical distinction. It suggests not a difference in ambition, but a profound difference in technique. Baalbek's methods, while advanced, feel like a magnification of known principles: bigger saws, stronger levers, more people. Our quarry feels like a leap into a different principle altogether. This comparison is not about declaring one site superior to another. It is about recognizing a crucial and often overlooked truth about the ancient world. We tend to search for a single, monolithic lost technology, a universal secret that explains every mystery. But what if the reality was far richer? What if, across different continents and cultures, various groups of builders had independently, or through shared, forgotten exchanges, developed their own sophisticated branches of megalithic science? Baalbek might represent the pinnacle of macro-engineering, a mastery of mass and movement. Our quarry might represent the pinnacle of micro-engineering, a mastery of material and finish. Each adapted its methods to its local stone, its cultural purpose, and its environmental constraints. One aimed to awe with sheer magnitude, the other, perhaps, to achieve a perfection of form for a reason we have yet to fully grasp. This diversity is more exciting than a single lost secret. It paints a picture of a deeper past where innovation was not a single thread, but a tapestry of different solutions to the same fundamental human urge to shape the world with lasting, meaningful stone. The smooth surfaces and perfect corners are not just aesthetically pleasing, they are mathematically precise. To truly grasp their anomaly, we must view them through the lens of modern precision engineering. This is not about romanticizing the past, but about applying a cold, technical standard of measurement. The tolerances observed here: the flatness of a wall over several meters, the parallel alignment of multiple cuts, the consistent depth of those surgical trenches, are measurements we typically associate with machine shops and industrial manufacturing floors. Engineer and author Christopher Dunn has long championed this analytical perspective, approaching ancient stonework not as an archaeologist might, but as a machinist would. He asks not the speculative why, but the rigorously practical how. How do you achieve a surface that flat without a surface plate for reference? How do you maintain parallel alignment over such distances without a laser or a taut wire under perfect tension? This line of questioning forces a profound paradigm shift in how we understand the site's purpose. It moves us from thinking about grand, imposing monuments to considering exact, functional specifications. If the stone was destined for a temple, perhaps its perfection was spiritual, but the engineering lens suggests another possibility. What if this precision served a mechanical function? Imagine two of these blocks meeting. Their flawless surfaces would create a near-perfect seal, a joint so tight it could be waterproof or even airtight. Or consider the idea of an interface. Could these stones have been designed to accept other components, metal fittings, pivoting doors, or even parts of a larger, complex apparatus? This reframes the entire operation. We are no longer looking at simple quarrying where rough stone is extracted for later shaping. We are witnessing component fabrication. Each block was a finished part, manufactured to a specific, repeatable standard, ready for assembly. The chilling implication of this view is that the final product, the structure or device these stones were meant for, demanded a level of exactitude we have not yet discovered in the archaeological record. The precision was not for show, it was a requirement, and that requirement points toward a sophistication of design, a final application that remains the quarry's most carefully guarded secret. What kind of construction, what kind of ancient technology demanded interchangeable parts carved from granite with the consistency of modern machine-tooled steel? The stone may be silent, but human memory is not. In the villages that dot the foothills surrounding the plateau, if you listen closely to the oldest stories passed down by firelight, you might hear a curious refrain. Elders sometimes speak of a time when the great mountain itself was soft, when its stone could be shaped like wet clay by the hands of the ancestors. Other tales whisper of blocks that moved themselves, guided by a song, or of cuts made not by tools but by the focused breath of the gods. To the modern ear, these are charming myths, poetic explanations for a past too distant to recall. But what if we are listening wrong? What if, instead of dismissing them as fantasy, we treat these stories as the last surviving witnesses? An anthropologist approaching this site would do exactly that. They would collect these fragments of folklore not as fiction but as data, as a culture's long-term attempt to make sense of a reality that had become technologically incomprehensible. When a society loses the knowledge of how something was done, but the physical proof of it remains towering over them, they must craft a story to fill the gap. The language they use is not the language of engineering manuals. It is the language of magic, of divinity, of elemental forces. A legend about stone being soft could be a profound metaphor. It might encode a memory of a plant-based solvent, a chemical process that temporarily altered the stone's workability, making it malleable to the touch. A story about stones moved by song could be a cultural echo of a forgotten sonic technology, where resonant frequencies reduced friction or guided placement. Even a tale of gods cutting with their breath might preserve a kernel of truth about the controlled application of heat and sudden cooling, the fiery breath that softened, followed by the chilling breath that split. These narratives are not lies, they are translations. They represent the human mind, generations removed from the original builders, trying to explain the inexplicable. The ancestors looked at these smooth walls and perfect corners, compared them to the crude results from their own copper chisels, and arrived at a logical conclusion. Whoever did this must have operated on a different plane of reality. So they attributed the work to giants, to sky people, or to deities. This is not a failure of their intellect, it is a testament to the magnitude of the achievement. The technology had so far surpassed the common understanding of the era that it effectively became magic, and magic in the form of myth is how that memory was preserved. By analyzing these tales with this lens, we are not chasing ghosts. We are engaging in a form of cultural archaeology, sifting through the layers of symbolic language to find the bedrock of practical experience. The metaphor is the clue. When every logical explanation fails, the stories people tell about their own landscape become the most important artifact of all. They are the soft, enduring imprint of a hard, lost truth. They remind us that technology is not just about the tools we leave behind, but about the stories we tell long after those tools have turned to dust. The quarry's greatest secret may not be carved in the granite at all, but waiting in the whispers of the wind and the fading memories of the people who never stopped wondering how such a thing could be. The quarry's final act is not a story of completion, but of sudden, unexplained silence. The evidence for this is etched into the landscape with a haunting clarity. Partially cut blocks remain exactly where the workers left them, frozen in mid-creation. One monolith is severed from the bedrock on 3 sides, its fourth still clinging to the mountain, as if the call to stop came in the middle of a single stroke. Ramps and pathways, so meticulously engineered, lead not to a distant temple but to nowhere. The site feels not abandoned but evacuated. This points to a powerful external disruption, an event so compelling it forced a permanent halt to one of the most sophisticated operations of its age. The question of what that event was leads us into the realm of environmental detective work. A dramatic and rapid shift in climate is a prime suspect. The region's geology, with those telltale water erosion patterns on ancient surfaces, suggests the plateau has not always been this dry. What if the weather itself turned against the builders? A prolonged drought could have devastated the agricultural base that fed the massive workforce, making the project unsustainable. Conversely, a sudden onset of much colder, glacial conditions could have made the high plateau uninhabitable, burying the worksite in snow and ice for generations. Or perhaps the cataclysm was more immediate. A massive earthquake, common in many mountainous regions, could have shattered the carefully prepared pathways and fractured the very stone they were extracting, rendering the entire endeavor futile overnight. The quarry, in this light, becomes a tragic time capsule. It captures a moment of peak technological activity and then seals it, preserving the methods precisely because they were never finished, never replicated elsewhere. This introduces a profound and unsettling idea about the transmission of knowledge. Advanced techniques are fragile. They rely on master artisans teaching apprentices, on specialized roles within a stable society, on the continuous application of the craft. If the society that nurtured this knowledge fractures under famine, flees a changing climate, or is dispersed by conflict, that intricate web of understanding can snap in a single generation. The builders may not have had time to write down their methods if they ever did. Their expertise lived in their hands, in their eyes, in the collective memory of the guild. When they left the mountain, that living library may have walked away with them, only to be scattered and lost to the winds of a changing world. The abandonment, therefore, is not an ending but a rupture. It is the reason we are left with the effect but not the cause, with the perfect cut but not the tool. The very event that preserved the site for us as a pristine archaeological puzzle is likely the same event that erased the instructions for solving it. We are left gazing at a frozen moment of genius, a symphony of stone interrupted mid-note, its final chord forever hanging in the silent mountain air. The gap between what we can replicate and what we see in the stone is not theoretical. It has been measured in sweat, time, and shattered copper. In recent decades, several dedicated teams of archaeologists and skilled stonemasons have taken on the ultimate challenge. Their mission was straightforward: to recreate the quarry's signature cuts using only the tools and materials we believe were available at the time. Armed with copper chisels, stone hammers, sand, water, and sheer determination, they set to work. The results of these modern experiments are profoundly illuminating, and they point to a reality far more complex than we might hope. Yes, with enough relentless effort, these teams can eventually shape a block of granite. They can, over weeks or months of grueling labor, coax a rough form from the stone. They can even create a surface that looks reasonably flat from a distance. But they consistently fail to achieve two critical benchmarks. The first is speed. The work is agonizingly slow, a pace that makes the idea of quarrying hundreds of identical blocks for a large project seem like the work of centuries, not a single generation. The second and more telling failure is in the finish. No matter how skilled the mason, no matter how patient the abrasion, the surface left behind is never that eerie, uniform smoothness. It is always textured. It bears the scars of the process, the pockmarks from pounding, the gritty swirls from sand sawing, the subtle undulations that betray human hands. The stone from the ancient quarry shows none of this. It is clinically clean. This creates what researchers call a proof of problem. The experiments prove it is possible to eventually get a similar shape with primitive tools, but they also prove how spectacularly implausible it is that those tools alone created what we see. The modern attempts require a monumental investment of time and labor for a single block, whereas the ancient site shows evidence of an efficient, almost industrial-scale production. Think of it like this: you could, in theory, dig a swimming pool with a teaspoon. Given enough time and will, you could eventually move the earth. But if you came across a perfectly sculpted Olympic-sized pool with laser-straight sides and a flawlessly level bottom, you would never assume it was dug with a teaspoon. You would know instinctively that a different order of technology was at work. The modern replication projects serve the same function. They highlight the immense chasm between what is minimally possible with brute force and what was actually achieved with apparent grace and speed. They demonstrate that our standard toolbox is missing something crucial. Perhaps it is a forgotten jig that guided cuts with unerring accuracy. Maybe it was a lost abrasive formula that worked 10 times faster than simple sand. Or it could be an entire process like thermal spalling or sonic resonance that we have not yet dared to test at full scale. These experiments do not close the case. They widen it. They turn the mystery from an archaeological question into a practical, tactile problem that anyone can understand. By showing us just how hard it is to do what the ancients did, even with our modern understanding of physics and materials, they force a humbling admission. We are not just looking for a lost tool. We are likely missing a fundamental piece of the puzzle, a clever shortcut or a proprietary technique that transformed an impossible task into a repeatable, efficient operation. The silent stone has outsmarted our best attempts to copy it, and in doing so has only deepened the intrigue of its own creation. The rhythm of the work may have been written in the stars. Beyond the solstice alignments that illuminated the stone, the builders could have used the heavens as a meticulous project manager, their celestial calendar dictating the very tempo of extraction. Imagine the practical advantage of timing major cutting phases with the brightest nights of the full moon, effectively doubling the productive hours with that silvery, shadow-revealing light. Or consider the deeper significance of commencing a new, year-long quarrying campaign not on an arbitrary date, but with the heliacal rising of a specific, revered star, its first appearance just before dawn after a period of invisibility. This event, a powerful symbol of renewal and return across many ancient cultures, would consecrate the entire season's labor. In this integrated system, astronomy was not merely observational. It was operational. Each block's journey from bedrock to pathway was not just a logistical step, but a step in a cosmic dance. The work became a ritual performed in sync with the universe, its progress measured in lunar cycles and stellar returns, ensuring every action was spiritually sanctioned and harmoniously timed. This reflects a holistic worldview that is profoundly alien to our modern engineering mindset. We separate the practical from the sacred. We build because we need a structure on a timeline dictated by budgets and weather. For these builders, the need for the structure and the act of creating it were inseparable from the order of the cosmos itself. Their technology was an expression of cosmic harmony. To cut the stone correctly was to honor the same principles that guided the planets. This fusion of the celestial and the terrestrial turns the entire quarry from a construction site into a kind of temple of process, where every swing of the hammer, every application of the unseen tool, resonated with a meaning that reached far beyond the mountain. It suggests that their greatest innovation may not have been in the tool itself, but in the seamless way they wove its use into the very fabric of their perceived reality. The smooth surfaces that defy the eye may still hold answers invisible to it. To move beyond speculation, we must shrink our perspective from the monumental to the microscopic, where the stone itself might still bear the faintest fingerprints of its making. This is the realm of petrographic analysis, where scientists use powerful microscopes to examine the very crystal structure of the granite at the cut lines. It is a forensic investigation, treating the quarry as a crime scene and searching for the minute evidence left by the perpetrator, the unknown tool or process. The question is stark: have such rigorous, peer-reviewed studies been conducted on these specific surfaces? The answer, frustratingly, is that comprehensive, officially published analyses are rare. The site often exists in a kind of academic twilight, more discussed in exploratory literature than subjected to the full battery of modern laboratory science. This lack of definitive data is in itself a telling part of the mystery. It leaves a vacuum where intriguing yet controversial observations from independent researchers have flowed. Some claim their microscopic examinations have revealed anomalies. One persistent report is the suggestion of vitrification, a transformation where the very surface of the granite shows signs of having been briefly melted and re-solidified, creating a thin, glass-like layer. In a modern context, we see this where intense heat is applied, like the scorch marks from a plasma torch on steel. If verified on the ancient granite, it would be a bombshell, pointing directly to the application of extreme, focused heat, perhaps lending powerful support to the thermal spalling or even more speculative lost energy source theories. Other observers point to the specific character of the polish. They argue that the microscopic wear patterns on the stone do not match the chaotic, gritty scarring left by sand or even crushed quartz abrasives dragged under pressure. Instead, they describe a more uniform, almost fluid wear pattern, as if the stone was uniformly planed away by a process that acted evenly across the entire surface. These micro-clues are the tantalizing frontier of the investigation. They represent the potential for hard, empirical data to finally judge between competing ideas. Yet, they remain hotly disputed. Mainstream skepticism is high, often questioning the methodology of the observations or suggesting natural geological processes could mimic these effects over millennia. The vitrification could be from lightning strikes. The unusual polish could be the result of specific wind-blown sands over centuries. This scientific controversy is not a weakness in the story, it is the essential next chapter. It highlights that the mystery is no longer just about what we see with our eyes, but about what we can prove with instruments. The true resolution may one day come not from a grand new theory, but from a peer-reviewed paper in a geology journal, detailing the chemical signature of a tool we never knew existed, captured in a crystal 1,000 times smaller than a grain of sand. Until that day comes, these microscopic clues stand as silent, debated witnesses, reminding us that the quarry's greatest secrets may be written in a language so small, we are only just learning how to read it. The quarry's silent stones speak a powerful economic truth. To sustain an operation of this magnitude, the society behind it must have been extraordinarily prosperous. Think of the basic needs. A workforce large enough to cut, move, and manage this stone did not farm for its own food. They were specialists fed by the surplus of others. This means the agricultural base supporting them was not merely surviving from season to season. It was thriving, producing enough grain, vegetables, and livestock to feed hundreds, perhaps thousands, of mouths not directly tied to the land. Such abundance does not happen by accident. It is the product of advanced farming techniques, perhaps irrigation systems that turned marginal land fertile, or crop rotation methods that preserved soil health year after year. It suggests a deep, generational knowledge of the local environment, a mastery of the land that created the foundational wealth for everything else. This wealth had to flow, and that requires more than just full granaries. It demands a system: the copper for tools, the timber for rollers and levers, the abrasives harder than granite, the fibers for immense ropes. These materials likely came from far beyond the plateau. Their presence here points to extensive, well-established trade networks. Caravans of donkeys or boats along distant rivers would have moved these vital goods, a circulation of resources that connected this remote mountain to a wider economic world. Someone had to organize this. Someone had to coordinate the farmers, the traders, the craftsmen, and the laborers. This is where the idea of a centralized authority emerges, not as a tyrannical force, but as a necessary administrative mind. A council of elders, a priest-king, or a guild of master builders would have been required to allocate resources, to plan the work seasons, and to resolve the countless logistical conflicts that arise in a project spanning decades. They were the project managers of the ancient world, balancing budgets measured in grain and labor instead of currency. Therefore, the quarry is far more than a collection of impressive cuts. It is a macroeconomic indicator carved in stone. Each smooth surface is a testament to a society that had solved the fundamental challenges of surplus, distribution, and complex organization. Its existence quietly argues that the civilization responsible reached a level of administrative sophistication and material comfort that our historical models for the region and era might not fully account for. We often picture ancient peoples living on the edge of subsistence, their energies consumed by the daily struggle for food and safety. This site contradicts that image entirely. It shows us a culture with the economic breathing room to dream in granite, to invest generations of labor and wealth into a vision whose ultimate purpose we can only guess at. The real treasure extracted from this mountain may not have been the stone itself, but the profound social achievement its quarrying represents a fleeting golden age of stability and surplus, whose most durable relic is the empty space it left behind. Amid the scattered evidence of a master plan, one object holds a unique and haunting power. It is the unfinished block, a stone caught forever between being part of the mountain and becoming part of a monument. There is a profound, almost human vulnerability to it. While a finished block speaks of success and a tool mark speaks of action, this stone speaks of intention interrupted. It is ambition frozen in time, a perfect snapshot of a process halted mid-stride. This is not a failure. It is a gift to us across the centuries, a three-dimensional instruction manual left open on the page where the workers stopped. To study an unfinished block is to watch a ghostly replay of their method, frame by frozen frame. The first step is often a shallow scoring, a guideline etched onto the bedrock surface, mapping out the future block's perfect rectangle. Then comes the trenching phase, where those deep, narrow grooves are cut down along the scored lines, plunging into the stone like the borders of a giant cookie cutter. The real magic and the greatest risk comes next: the undercutting. This is where workers would have had to reach beneath the partially liberated block to sever its final connection to the living earth. On an unfinished stone, you can see exactly how far they got. The clean, smooth sides show where their mysterious technology succeeded. The ragged, fractured base shows where the stone still clung, or perhaps where the workers faced an insurmountable obstacle. Each of these stages is a data point. The absence of tool marks on the smooth faces tells us the cutting process was astonishingly clean. The precise depth of the trenches hints at how much material they were willing to remove with such focused effort. The very shape of the undercut reveals their understanding of leverage and weight distribution, showing they knew exactly where to cut to make the final separation possible, perhaps even easy. These blocks are more than abandoned stones. They are paused instructional videos from a lost world. Every contour, every transition from worked surface to raw rock is a word in a silent language of engineering. They show us not just what the builders could do, but how they thought step by logical step in their dialogue with the mountain. In their unfinished state, they ask us the most direct question of all. What happened in that final moment that made them lay down their tools and walk away, leaving their masterpiece half born from the stone? Perhaps the most radical idea of all asks us to forget the concept of cutting entirely. What if the smooth, seamless stone before us was never carved from the mountain, but was instead cast into place like modern concrete? This is the startling proposition of the Geopolymer Theory, pioneered by materials scientist Joseph Davidovits. He suggests that certain ancient builders possessed the knowledge to create an artificial stone, a kind of high-tech limestone-based concrete that could be mixed as a slurry, poured into wooden formwork, and left to harden into a solid, monolithic block. At first glance, this seems an unlikely solution for our granite quarry. The theory was originally developed to explain the construction of the Egyptian pyramids from sedimentary limestone, a material far more amenable to chemical reconstitution. The idea of creating a synthetic version of hard, crystalline igneous rock like granite is a much greater chemical hurdle. Yet, the value of this theory is not in its direct application here, but in the profound mental shift it demands. It forces a complete paradigm rupture. What if we have been misreading the evidence from the very beginning? Those clean lines and perfect corners we assume are cut marks. Could they instead be the seams from ancient wooden molds, the telltale lines where one poured section met another? Could the unsettling uniformity of the stone be the result of a consistent slurry mix, not a consistent cutting tool? This line of thinking challenges the most foundational assumption we have held, that every ancient stone structure is the product of subtractive technology, where material is removed to reveal a form. Geopolymer theory introduces the possibility of additive technology, where the form is built up from a liquid state. While the consensus of geology makes this highly improbable for this specific site, the theory performs an essential service. It exemplifies the kind of intellectual bravery required to solve a mystery of this magnitude. We must be willing to question not just the how, but the what. Are we looking at a quarry, or could this be a prehistoric prefabrication plant? The very question, however contentious, breaks the logjam of conventional thought. It liberates us from the endless search for a missing chisel or saw, and invites us to consider a lost branch of materials science. It reminds us that the ingenuity of the past may have expressed itself in ways that leave no traditional tools behind, because the primary tool was not a blade but a recipe. The stone itself, in this view, becomes the artifact of a forgotten chemical process, a permanent echo of a liquid moment frozen in time. The stone's surface has told its story, but the mountain itself may hold another buried chapter. To read it, we must turn to technologies that see with sound and radio waves, not with eyes. Ground-penetrating radar is one such tool. By sending pulses of energy into the earth and listening for their echoes, it can paint a detailed picture of what lies beneath our feet, revealing differences in soil density, voids, and man-made structures without ever lifting a shovel. Acoustic tomography works on a similar principle, using sound waves to map the interior of solid rock like a medical CT scan for the Earth. When applied to this ancient quarry, these methods become a form of time travel, allowing us to peer through layers of history and ask the site a new set of questions. What if the smooth ramps and platforms are merely the visible tip of a much larger, hidden infrastructure? A comprehensive subsurface survey could reveal a network of drainage channels, carefully engineered to divert groundwater or to feed the abrasive slurry needed for cutting. It might uncover resonant chambers carved into the bedrock, purpose-built cavities that could amplify specific frequencies if the sonic tool theory holds any weight. Perhaps most tantalizingly, it could locate the one artifact that has eluded us, a storage chamber or workshop, its contents preserved in the dry, sealed darkness, holding the very tools or chemical residues that would solve the mystery. This approach has already rewritten histories elsewhere. At sites like the Neolithic temple complex of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, ground-penetrating radar revealed a staggering scale of undiscovered structures, proving the known ruins were just a fraction of a much grander design. Applying this same non-invasive science here is not about proving one theory over another. It is about restoring depth to our investigation. For too long, we have studied the quarry as a two-dimensional puzzle, focusing only on what the sun touches. But the builders worked in 3 dimensions. They cut down, they tunneled, they engineered foundations. To understand their full intent, we must see the site as they did, as a volume to be shaped both above and below. A detailed acoustic map would transform the plateau from a collection of enigmatic features into a coherent, engineered landscape. It could show us the logic behind the placement of each trench and ramp, revealing a master plan for material flow and worker movement that is invisible from the surface. This is the great advantage of bringing 21st century tools to a millennia-old riddle. We are no longer limited to surface observation and speculation. We can ask the mountain directly what it conceals and listen for its answer in the silent echoes of radar and sound. The next breakthrough in this story may not come from a new interpretation of the cuts, but from a screen displaying a ghostly, glowing image of a hidden world beneath them, waiting to be understood. The true power of this silent quarry lies not in its stone, but in what it does to our minds. Beyond the measurements and the geological debates, this place exerts a magnetic pull on our imagination. It captivates because it is an anomaly, a clear and undeniable crack in the smooth wall of the official historical narrative. We are taught a linear story of human progress, a steady climb from simple tools to complex machines. But here is a piece of evidence that does not fit on that timeline. It whispers that the story is incomplete, that the past holds pockets of sophistication we have either forgotten or failed to recognize. This is profoundly compelling because it restores a sense of wonder to history. It transforms the past from a series of settled facts in a textbook into a living, breathing mystery filled with possibility. The quarry becomes a symbol, a physical reminder that our ancestors may have been far more ingenious than we give them credit for. There is a psychological liberation in this. It challenges the authority of established narratives, whether academic or cultural, and in doing so, it empowers our own individual curiosity. You do not need a degree in archaeology to look at those smooth cuts and feel that something is profoundly off. That intuitive spark, that moment of questioning, is where the real investigation begins. This mystery invites everyone to the table. It turns each viewer into a detective, examining the clues, weighing the theories, and forming their own conclusions. The thrill is not in finding a definitive answer, but in the act of searching itself. It is the engagement with a puzzle that, by its very nature, may never be fully solved. This taps into a fundamental human drive, the need to explore the edges of what we know and to question the boundaries of what we believe is possible. The quarry, therefore, is more than an archaeological site. It is a mirror. It reflects back our own desire for a deeper, richer, and more mysterious past. It asks us to consider that the limits of human potential in ancient times were not the limits we have drawn on our charts. In a world that often feels fully mapped and explained, such a place offers a rare and precious gift, the gift of an open question. It reassures us that history is not a closed book with a final chapter, but an ongoing conversation, and we are all invited to contribute a thought, a theory, or simply a sense of awe. Every great mystery deserves a healthy dose of skepticism. The mainstream archaeological perspective offers a crucial counterweight to more speculative theories, grounding the conversation in evidence and established principles. This viewpoint is not about dismissing the wonder of the site, but about applying the rigorous discipline of the scientific method. From this lens, the quarry is not an anomaly of lost technology, but a supreme testament to human patience, organization, and the cumulative power of simple, well-understood tools applied over generations. Experts in this camp point to the undeniable successes of experimental archaeology. We have seen modern teams using replicas of copper chisels, stone hammers, and abrasive sands eventually shape granite. The process is brutally slow, but it is possible. This, they argue, is the definitive answer. Given enough time and a large enough workforce, there is no cut, no trench, no smooth surface that cannot be achieved through relentless, incremental effort. The mystery from this angle evaporates. It is replaced by a narrative of immense social cohesion, where a culture mobilized its entire population around a shared sacred goal, willing to spend centuries perfecting their craft. The precision is explained not by advanced machinery, but by the honed skill of master artisans, their eyes and hands calibrated by a lifetime of working the stone. The perfect right angles, a product of simple wooden set squares and plumb bobs, tools we know existed. The deep trenches, the result of patient pounding with hard dolerite stones along a line, day after day, year after year. This perspective is powerfully logical and satisfyingly complete. It requires no unknown forces or vanished civilizations. It fits neatly within our existing understanding of human capability. Yet, for all its compelling logic, a quiet but persistent question remains. This time and labor model explains the what. Yes, you can get there with these tools. But does it adequately explain the how we actually see on the ground? The scale of the operation suggests not just effort, but a specific kind of efficiency. The uniformity of the cuts across hundreds of blocks points toward a standardized process, not just individual artisan skill. The eerie absence of the expected tool marks, the pockmarks and erratic grooves from endless pounding, creates a forensic discrepancy. If this was a centuries-long project using primitive methods, the site should be a museum of their struggle, littered with the evidence of trial and error, of broken tools and corrective cuts. Instead, it presents a face of serene, repetitive success. The mainstream view asks us to accept that generations of workers achieved near-flawless results with tools that, in every modern experiment, leave a very different, much rougher signature. This is not a dismissal of the scientific perspective, but an acknowledgement of its limits when faced with such clean geometry. The skeptical stance is essential, for it prevents us from chasing fantasies. But the stone's own testimony suggests that the classic time and labor argument, while comforting in its simplicity, might itself be an oversimplification. It accounts for the brute force but perhaps misses the clever shortcut, the elegant innovation that transformed an agonizing slog into a streamlined operation. The true answer likely lies not in choosing one side over the other, but in the fertile and challenging space between what we know was possible and what the mountain quietly insists was actually done. The silent perfection of the quarry does not exist in a vacuum. Its ghost may linger in stones shaped centuries, even millennia later, in cultures separated by vast oceans and time. If this advanced knowledge was not utterly destroyed when the workers left the mountain, where did it go? One compelling possibility is that it did not vanish but dispersed. Imagine a master builder or a guild of artisans, their home collapsing due to drought or conflict, carrying their specialized understanding with them as they traveled. They would have become highly prized refugees, their skills a form of intellectual currency traded to new patrons in distant lands. This diaspora of knowledge offers a bridge between the quarry's impossible precision and the slightly more familiar, yet still baffling, work of later civilizations. Look, for instance, at the foundational stones of certain Inca structures in the Andes. The famous walls of Sacsayhuaman or Ollantaytambo feature gigantic blocks of andesite, a hard volcanic stone, fitted together with seams so tight you cannot slide a piece of paper between them. The surfaces are beautifully worked, often with a subtle, rounded bevel, and the joints are complex, interlocking puzzles. Yet, when examined closely, the stone shows the marks of its making, pecking from stone hammers, the evidence of patient abrasion. The result is magnificent, but the method, while advanced, feels like a descendant of the quarry's technology, a step removed from the source. It is as if the core principle of precision fitting survived the journey, but the original, clean cutting technique, the method that left no tool marks, was lost or adapted to new tools and materials. Similarly, consider the colossal basalt foundations of temples in places like ancient Mesopotamia or Mesoamerica. These stones are precisely shaped and positioned, demonstrating a masterful command of stonework. But again, the surfaces tell a story of tremendous effort with known tools, not of an effortless, vanished process. This pattern suggests a slow degradation, a telephone game played across generations and continents. The first builders possessed the original, potent formula. Their successors learned the principles of geometry, alignment, and jointing, but perhaps not the secret of the smooth cut itself. With each passing generation and each migration to a new kingdom, the knowledge would become more diluted, more interpretive. The why of perfect joints remained for stability, for sacred geometry, for prestige. But the how gradually shifted from a proprietary, high-efficiency technique to the immensely laborious, yet still effective, methods we see in these later wonders. The quarry, then, may represent the pure, undiluted source. It is the high watermark of a specific stoneworking technology. What we see in the Inca walls or the Mesopotamian foundations are the echoes, the ripples from that source spreading outward and growing fainter with time and distance. The later cultures achieved staggering results, but they did so by applying mountains of labor to approximate what the original builders achieved with what appears to be a startling economy of effort. This transforms the later sites from standalone mysteries into chapters in a longer, fading story. They are not failures to replicate, but remarkable successes of knowledge preservation in an imperfect world. They show a thread of understanding, however frayed, connecting back to a peak of innovation that itself was lost to whatever silent cataclysm emptied the mountain workshop. The stones of Cusco and Babylon are not just monuments to their own builders. In their striving for perfection, they are unconscious homages to an older, sharper knowledge, a ghost in the masonry that we are only now beginning to sense. That unsettling perfection in the stone forces us to confront a deeper, more personal question. What does it even mean to be an advanced society? For us, the answer seems self-evident. We measure progress in silicon chips and steel skyscrapers, in the roar of engines and the silent hum of global networks. Our technological tree is defined by complexity, by ever more intricate machines built from extracted and refined materials. We see a straight, ascending line from the first smelted ore to the microprocessors in our hands, but the quarry presents a profound challenge to this entire worldview. What if a different kind of civilization grew a completely different technological tree? Imagine a society whose pinnacle of achievement was not in building machines to dominate nature, but in developing a deep, almost intuitive dialogue with it. Their sophistication might have been expressed not through complexity, but through an elegant, minimalist application of natural principles. Instead of forging a harder metal to cut the stone, they might have learned to ask the stone itself to open, using the precise language of vibration or chemistry or thermal stress. Their greatest invention might not have been a device you could hold, but a recipe you could mix or a frequency you could sing. This idea dismantles our cultural arrogance. It suggests that what we label as primitive might simply be different, a parallel path of innovation that valued harmony with natural forces over their brute force conquest. This lost branch of knowledge represents a different kind of intelligence, one focused on observation, subtlety, and integration. It asks us to expand our definition of advanced to include mastery that leaves a gentle footprint, a technology so seamless with the world that its tools vanish, leaving only the flawless result as proof it ever existed. The silent quarry is not just an archaeological puzzle. It is a philosophical mirror reflecting our own biases about progress. It whispers that the height of human ingenuity may not always look like a factory. Sometimes it might look like a mountain quietly holding the secret of a conversation between people and stone that we have forgotten how to have. This silent plateau is a message carved in granite. It transmits a signal across the centuries, not in words but in form and function. The statement is simple yet earth-shaking. We could do this. Every smooth plane, every perfect corner, every deep and narrow trench is a syllable in that declaration. It is a testament to a capability, a snapshot of a society operating at a peak of applied knowledge we are still struggling to measure. This is the quarry's ultimate power. It functions not as a ruin, but as a unique kind of time machine. It does not transport our bodies, but it transmits a clear, unambiguous thought from a distant mind. The technology itself may be lost, but its signature is permanently etched, waiting for us to learn its language. The message is not in the stone that remains. It is encoded in the negative space, in the precise shapes that were removed from the living mountain. Each void where a block once sat, each clean incision, is a data point. To decipher this message, we cannot rely on a single discipline. The old ways of looking are insufficient. Solving this riddle demands a fusion of minds. We must merge the archaeologist's eye for context with the materials scientist's understanding of crystalline structure. We need the engineer's grasp of forces and tolerances, and perhaps even the ethnobotanist's knowledge of forgotten plant properties. It is a puzzle that can only be solved in the intersection of these fields, in the collaborative space where rigid specializations break down. This is why the site feels so disruptive. It refuses to fit neatly into our established timelines or cultural categories. It stands as an obstinate fact that does not align with our charts of gradual progression. Its very existence is a demand. It compels us to expand our historical frameworks, or at least to question their unspoken rigidity. We are asked to consider that human history might not be a single, smooth upward slope, but a landscape with many peaks and valleys, some of which we have yet to map. This makes the quarry a monument of a rare and profound kind. It is not a tribute to a specific king or a celebration of a military victory, those common themes of ancient grandeur. There are no boastful inscriptions here. Instead, it is a monument to pure capability. It honors the human capacity to observe, to experiment, and to innovate on a breathtaking scale. It commemorates the moment when a group of people looked at a mountain of unyielding granite and saw not an obstacle, but a partner in a great work. That silent capability, frozen in stone, is the true treasure the mountain guards. It is a gift from the past that asks nothing of us but our curiosity, our humility, and our willingness to listen to the quiet story the stones have been waiting for millennia to tell. The individual clues are like scattered pieces of a grand puzzle, each one fascinating yet incomplete on its own. But when we step back and place them together on the same table, a startlingly coherent image begins to emerge, one far more intricate than any single theory could contain. The remote, challenging location was not an accident, but a deliberate choice for a specific, perfect stone. The hardness of that granite dictated a need for something beyond simple force. The scale of the operation demanded not just laborers, but a society with immense resources and organizational genius. The missing tools suggest a process that left little behind, and the watermarks whisper of a timeline that may stretch our understanding of history itself. Each piece validates the others, forming a chain of logic that points to a single, inescapable conclusion. This was not a haphazard effort. It was the product of a fully realized and astonishingly sophisticated system. To solve the riddle of the cuts, we must move beyond the either-or debates. It is unlikely that the builders relied on just one miraculous secret. The true answer almost certainly lies in a synergistic combination, a multi-step process where different techniques were used in concert, each playing to its unique strength. Imagine a master craftsperson approaching the granite not with a single tool, but with an entire strategic playbook. The first step might have been thermal preparation. By building controlled fires along a precise line, they could have used intense heat to create a zone of microscopic weakness in the stone, a pre-stressed fault line. Then, with the granite in this temporarily vulnerable state, they could have applied their abrasive technology, whether a taut, grit-embedded cord or a directed slurry, to saw through the material with far greater speed and less wear on their materials. This combination turns two challenging methods into one elegant, efficient solution. The heat does the initial work of compromising the stone's integrity, and the abrasion performs the clean, controlled separation. This technical symphony was conducted within a larger, holistic framework. The work was not scheduled by the clock, but by the stars and seasons, aligning major phases with solstice light for visibility or celestial events for spiritual significance. The workforce was not a nameless mob, but a stratified guild of specialists, master cutters, thermal engineers, abrasive chemists, ramp designers, and moving crews, all operating under a centralized authority that managed food, trade, and housing. This was not a construction site. It was a functioning, integrated academy of applied knowledge. The ancient Greeks had a word for this kind of seamless understanding, techné. It does not mean just technology or art in our fragmented, modern sense. It means the unified craft, the complete body of knowledge and skill that blends practical technique with deep theoretical understanding and even spiritual purpose. This is what we have lost sight of. We separate physics from engineering, engineering from astronomy, and astronomy from ritual. The builders of the quarry likely saw no such divisions. For them, the perfect right angle was a geometric truth, a structural necessity, and a sacred expression of cosmic order all at once. Their method, therefore, was this holistic techné in action. The precision of the cut was inseparable from the timing of the work, which was inseparable from the social organization that made it possible, which was in turn inseparable from the cultural meaning Chinese letter to the stone itself. The anomaly we struggle with is not a single lost tool, but this lost integration. We possess fragments of the knowledge, we understand abrasives, we know thermal spalling works, we can chart the stars, but we have divorced these elements from each other and from any larger, unifying worldview. The quarry stands as a testament to a different way of knowing, a different way of solving problems. It shows us that the height of ancient innovation may not have been a standalone invention, but a brilliantly orchestrated system where material science, celestial observation, logistics, and belief were all threads in the same unbreakable cord, a cord strong enough to slice through the heart of a mountain and leave a message of quiet, undeniable capability for the ages to ponder. The path forward is now unmistakable, though it is strewn with obstacles of convention and skepticism. To finally hear the full story the stones are trying to tell, we cannot rely on a single voice of expertise. The solution demands a chorus. Imagine a team arriving at the windswept plateau, but this time it is not a group of archaeologists alone. They are joined by a geologist with a portable spectrometer, analyzing the molecular signature of the cut surfaces for traces of thermal or chemical alteration. Beside them, an acoustic engineer sets up sensitive equipment to map the subterranean structure of the site and test its resonant properties. A master stonemason, her hands knowing the language of rock, examines the angles and finishes, comparing them to every traditional technique she has ever practiced or heard in legend. An archaeologist provides the cultural context, searching the soil not for tools, but for microscopic residues, pollen from specific plants, unusual mineral dust, anything that could hint at the process. This is the kind of interdisciplinary orchestra required to decode a symphony this complex. Each specialist listens for a different part of the melody the builders left behind. The geologist hears the stone's memory of heat or chemistry. The engineer hears the potential for sound. The mason hears the subtle decisions of a fellow craftsperson. Only when these notes are played together might we finally recognize the tune. This collaborative model is our most powerful new tool, far more advanced than any single technology. It represents a humility our modern, hyper-specialized world often lacks, the admission that some puzzles are too vast for one field to solve alone. The ancient builders themselves likely possessed this integrated knowledge. Their genius was holistic, blending observation of the natural world with practical application. To understand them, we must strive to reassemble that shattered whole. The greatest barriers to mounting such an expedition are not technical but human. They are the walls of academic silos, the competition for scarce research funding, and the institutional inertia that often favors safe, incremental studies over bold, synthetic inquiries. Convincing a university or a foundation to fund a team of experts from wildly different disciplines to study a single, enigmatic quarry requires a vision that sees beyond immediate, publishable results. It requires recognizing that the payoff is not merely a data point in a journal, but a potential paradigm shift in how we view a slice of human history. This is not a dry academic exercise, it is a recovery mission. We are attempting to retrieve a lost chapter from the library of human ingenuity, a chapter that could redefine our understanding of resilience and innovation. When we support such open-minded, collaborative research, we are investing in more than just solving a historical mystery. We are investing in a broader, more inclusive narrative of human achievement. We are affirming that the story of our species is not a simple, linear march, but a rich tapestry with many threads, some of which have frayed and faded, waiting patiently for us to have the wisdom and the will to weave them back into the whole. The silent quarry has issued its challenge across the centuries. The question is whether we, with all our fragmented modern knowledge, can finally muster the unified curiosity to answer it. The silent, scarred face of the ancient quarry offers no final verdict. Instead, it leaves us with a more profound gift, a question that echoes long after we look away. The precise cuts that reflect methods far ahead of their time stand as a permanent challenge to our historical complacency. They are a quiet argument against the idea that we have the past fully mapped and understood. These stones remind us that history is filled with a kind of dark matter, vast stretches of human knowledge, capability, and experience that have not yet been illuminated by our research or our imagination. This is not a failure of archaeology, but an invitation. It is a call to approach the past not as a solved puzzle, but as a living, breathing mystery still capable of surprising us. Let this exploration be a spark, one that reinvigorates your own curiosity about the incredible depths of the human story. If this mystery of stone and shadow resonated with you, we encourage you to delve deeper. Share your own theories and reflections in the comments below, and consider subscribing to join this ongoing conversation. We are committed to uncovering more of these hidden chapters, to listening for the whispers in the ruins and the stories written in forgotten stone. The quarry's final lesson is simple yet transformative. The stones are still speaking. We must only learn how to listen.